Well, welcome to today's webinar, focusing on the British Virgin Islands as part of our series of events focusing on financial centres across the world. Next slide, please. And I'd just like to introduce myself, first of all. Mike Wardle, I'm a Director and Head of Indices for the ZN Group, and I'm chairing the event today. Please do take a moment to look at the range of sponsors of the FS Club. We're very grateful to our sponsors for the work they allow us to do, ranging widely in these webinar series across the world and across subjects, across technology and finance. And I'd like very much to give you an idea about today's events. Next slide, please. We've got an agenda which runs for about 45 minutes, should we need it. And I'd very much like to welcome Simon Gray, Head of Business Development and Marketing at BVI Finance. Next slide, please. Simon had a career in banking, at Baring Asset Management, Barclays Wealth, and is an expert on Islamic Finance. But more recently has been working in the BVI, first of all in the Financial Services Commission as a special advisor to the Chief Executive, and now as Head of Business Development and Marketing at BVI Finance. And I'm sure Simon will tell you a lot more about BVI Finance than I'm able to share with you. So my job really is to get out of the way. We'll have question and answers towards the end of the session. And those of you who've used GoToWebinar before will know the drill. Those of you who haven't will find on the dashboard on your screen a question box. You can type in questions there, they'll come to us, and we'll field those questions at the Q&A session a little bit later in the webinar. So it just remains me to thank Simon very much for his time and attendance, and looking forward very much to his presentation. Simon, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much, Mike, and indeed ZN Group for this wonderful opportunity, and also Jonathan Smith, Weber Shandwick. I also would like to give my thanks on behalf of BVI Finance and BVI generally to the GFCI index for their very generous accolade, and we've increased our ranking by 14 places this year. This is in terms of top financial centre from Latin America and the Caribbean region, and this is in their 29th edition. And we're also ranked the top ranked British overseas territory with some very impressive competition, of course. But thank you to everyone. I also want to thank all of the members of BVI Finance, who quite frankly is in hard work and endeavour makes this kind of opportunity and accolade possible. So many thanks to everyone in the industry, both regulator and also the many of the regulated. What I propose to do is really anticipate a number of questions, though there'll be plenty of opportunity for Q&A at the end, by discussing a number of the key facets and aspects of what we do here in the BVI in terms of global financial services. And I think probably a good starting point is to discuss what makes the BVI such an attractive destination for business, what makes it such a business-friendly environment. Well, in just over about 30 years, the BVI has firmly established itself as one of the world's leading international financial centres and very much the go-to jurisdiction for the incorporation of companies, numbering in excess of 400,000 currently, especially those which are designed or created to facilitate cross-border trade, investment and business. And the foundations of the BVI success are its modern, flexible and efficient and often very cost-effective company legislation, which has been tailored to the needs of global business, its sound and stable government and respected financial regulation, and very much its cost effectiveness, in addition to its tax neutrality. And the BVI has attracted a global talent pool with a world-class expertise across the broad spectrum of international finance, from company incorporation through to M&A, funds, both conventional and esoteric, and advisory services on a range of complex global cross-border deals. But how important is this sort of reputation and international regulation, international recognition in terms of a during and a post-pandemic environment? Well, during these uniquely challenging and uncertain times, investors, business and clients drew confidence not only from the strength of the BVI's reputation in financial services, but also for its resilience in the face of crisis, most notably following the devastation of Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017. And it's significant that whilst there's no doubt COVID has been an absolute tragedy for the world and a personal loss for many, many people, in terms of the impact on business, we've actually seen it expand. And that's largely due to the ability of the BVI to operate in often challenging environments. And having experienced 2 devastating Category 5 hurricanes in 2017 and actually witnessed my house disintegrate around me, I was very impressed to find not only that firms' business continuity plans worked exceptionally well, in fact, a little too well in some cases. I was glad they came back, but they did, and they came back en masse within a matter of months. But within 2 business days, our companies register at the Financial Services Commission was registering companies again. And we were still registering overseas at our BCP sites, but we were actually registering companies from the BVI in spite of the devastation of the first of those hurricanes, and then surpassed by the later one, Hurricane Maria. And so over the past year, businesses from across the globe once again have placed their confidence in the BVI's track record for continuity in serving the needs of its clients and businesses. And during this global crisis, we thought to address the immediate needs of BVI businesses and the safety of our own local workforce and community. And using this as an opportunity, we accelerated our own digital transformation in terms of business and working practices, with a long-term view that continued to innovate for growth. We quickly adopted new technologies to facilitate virtual events, including conferences and roundtables for international clients across regions such as China, Latin America, and Africa. And our results for the past year demonstrate the success of our wider initiatives. BVI registered companies were involved in global transactions worth $5 billion during 2020, and incorporations in our jurisdiction dropped only slightly below the 2019 levels. This growth trend and trajectory carried into the first quarter of 2021, with company incorporations up by 47% on the Q1 figures for 2020 and 27% above Q4 in that same year. In addition, we continue to innovate in terms of our services offering during 2020. For instance, last year we launched a private investment funds regime in the BVI, which delivered a new regulatory framework for closed-ended funds, including private equity and venture capital funds. Another opportunity involved a spike during 2020 in the global popularity of special purpose acquisition company, SPACs, for private equity. The BVI proved popular for SPAC creation due to favourable factors, including our suitable company law, limited additional regulatory compliance requirements, and our jurisdiction's tax neutrality. But in terms of developing in international wealth planning and structuring, in the BVI we are very well positioned to cater for the international wealth planning needs of clients due to the stability of our jurisdiction and the business flexibility and affordability and friendliness that we can offer. And one new trend we've seen is the appetite for using BVI structures for wealth and estate planning in the Middle East, particularly with ultra high net worth families. This trend is set to continue as wealth is increasingly passed between generations. And in the BVI, we offer several structures to address this need. For example, our memorandum and articles of association process enables families to detail how shares in their business should be issued and allocated when a primary shareholder dies. And growth in this area is well underway, with the creation of BVI businesses originating in the Middle East, by way of example, rising by as much as 25% over the past 3 years, and we expect that significant growth to rise exponentially. But what about the changing regulatory landscape? For example, much of the media is talking about calls for a minimum corporate tax rate coming from the G7 countries. Well, as I've already mentioned, the BVI has built its reputation as a leading global financial centre, grounded in its robust, modern and transparent regulatory framework. One of the hallmarks of the BVI has been its track record of international cooperation and efforts to maintain and often surpass international standards. And the recent agreement on global tax standards is the start of a process that may take several years to work through. We are continuing to engage actively with the relevant countries and authorities on the practical application of a new global standard, whilst ensuring the continued success of the BVI's International Business and Finance Centre and its positive role in the global economy. In terms of strong, long-standing relationships with key markets such as mainland China, but also the rapidly emerging Africa, we're seeing these relationships develop faster and getting much deeper. We are seeing far more investment confidence from Latin America, Asia, and also Africa. A report by Capital Economics indicated that approximately 40% of the $1.5 trillion US that is mediated through the BVI each year originates in mainland China, whilst US $114 billion of outward investment stock comes from Latin America. These figures, which are independently produced, underpin the investment confidence we have in the Chinese and Latin American markets as growth drivers going forward. And key growth services for these developing markets include the family office model, the uptake of which is growing in territories across Asia, where the culture of wealth creation still has ties to the family business. Family office requirements fit readily within the BVI Client Services suite and dovetails with the growth of philanthropy and ethical finance services provision. Over the past year, we've further nurtured our relationships with clients in China and Latin America through a series of virtual conferences to facilitate conversations on future trade and investment. For instance, this past May, we held a virtual conference for Latin American clients. We also did two with Shenzhen in mainland China, and we addressed topics including international wealth planning, trust and succession planning, funds and business companies. And we've already started a virtual trade mission to Africa, focusing on Southern Africa, Western Africa, and East Africa. We call this theme Virtually Together, Virtually Everywhere. It began last year and is going to continue throughout this year and will extend into 2022. As for other specific markets that we are targeting for growth opportunities, the largest portion of BVI business continues to emerge from the Asia-Pacific region, and we now expect to see significant growth in business from India as the South Asian nation's finance sector is rapidly digitized. The Indian market is yet to mature and represents a significant development opportunity for the BVI in a similar manner to China. Indonesia, as Southeast Asia's largest economy, offers similar development opportunities as it continues to grow and digitally transform over the coming decade. In the wider global context, Latin America, the Middle East, and Africa are all regions with yet unfulfilled potential for the BVI as they continue to grow and share in the benefits of the global digital economy. Through conferences and events and thought leadership pieces, we are continuing to facilitate discussions and nurture relationships with clients in developing markets. For example, in this July, we held a roundtable event focused on trade and investment for the Southern African region. This virtual event focused on areas including the facilitation of trade to maximize growth and minimize risk in the process of turning the region into an economic powerhouse. BVI Finance believes data technologies and data-driven regulation and compliance are key and integral to a successful future financial services industry. In the BVI, we view data technology as intrinsic to the future of the financial services industry. Data-driven regulation and compliance is integral to global growth and success in this sector, and the BVI seeks to lead by example. For example, in 2021, the BVI government enacted the Data Protection Act, our regulatory equivalent to the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. The BVI is a regulation-focused smart financial services centre where data technologies are a means to drive innovation, leverage value, increase efficiency, manage risk, and create new and exciting opportunities. Moreover, we view the automation of regulation and compliance as areas that offer significant potential to transform services and support the work of regulators at a local and at a global level. And a good example of this can be seen in the success of the Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System, the BOSS as we call it, which we launched in 2017 to make company registration more efficient and robust for clients, and to advance our reputation as a leader in regulatory innovation. The BOSS has been lauded by law enforcement authorities such as the UK's National Crime Agency, and we currently share critical information with a very sizable number of countries worldwide. The BVI has been building a reputation for fintech, and in terms of some of the key developments, there have been several. We've been at the forefront of jurisdictions leading this development to make it more efficient, more cost-effective, faster, and to generate greater security. We focused on building a competitive advantage by providing the best environment for financial technology, or fintech, fused with the strongest regulatory technology, RegTech. An example of this is the BVI FinTech Regulatory Sandbox, which was developed to support fintech innovators and the needs of financial services in testing new fintech products. The sandbox enables the BVI Financial Services Commission, the FSC, to assess new fintech products for essential compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. And companies undergoing sandbox testing are afforded 18 months to conduct business in the BVI without a license. Moreover, the BVI sandbox anticipates the needs of financial services providers and innovators striving to succeed in an irrevocably digitized global commercial environment. Let me now turn to the debate about the concept of global village and how committed the BVI is to this concept. The role of the BVI in facilitating cross-border business helps to make a global village based on investment in cooperation and absolute reality. Over the past 3 decades, we have carefully and systematically increased the significance of our role in the global financial system through our leadership in regulatory development and services provision. Demonstrating the extent of our role in the global village of today, research by Capital Economics found that the BVI mediates more than US dollars 1.5 trillion in global investment and contributes over US dollars 15 billion in tax to national revenues while supporting 2.2 million jobs worldwide. Not bad for an archipelago of 63 islands. But the role of the BVI in global regulatory development is another vital strand of our contribution to the global village. We are steadfast in our commitment to meeting global standards through mutually beneficial collaborations with global regulators. For example, we are a long-standing member of the OECD's Global Forum on Tax and Exchange of Information and the Financial Action Task Force. In the wake of the global pandemic, the role of the BVI as a leading IFC has never been more critical, and we are continuing to evolve our range of financial services in line with the challenges of today's global business environment. In a world of globalized trade and capital investment, there will be an ever-increasing demand for financial services that facilitate efficient and secure cross-border transactions. And our commitment to the highest regulatory standards safeguards the integrity of our jurisdiction. BVI companies and their employees and the benefits reaped by developing nations and the wider global economy through the services that the BVI provides. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Simon, for that overview. And I'm sure we'll have some interesting discussion to be had afterwards. I just wanted to give a couple of views about the BVI as we see it through the lens of the Global Financial Centres Index. And the first thing to say is that although these things do bounce around a little bit, there's never quite a straight line, but the trend for the BVI's GFCI rating over the last few years is clearly upwards. Looking below the data, we see particular strengths in BVI in infrastructure and the group of reputational factors that we use in our data set for the GFCI. And your reputation is certainly very high amongst those across the world working in investment management and various forms of finance, trade finance, commodity finance, etc. So I think there's some real strengths for BVI, and you've outlined some of the connections you've been making with those across the world. If we take the next slide, please. And just in terms of connectivity, we track who, in our survey for the GFCI, who rates who. So we can see here that you have strong links to the Middle East through Dubai, good links to Chinese centres in Singapore, and of course good connections to London, which is always good to see when we look at these matters. So our view is, a very successful centre, a well-connected centre, and I was particularly interested to hear about the way you're reaching out to all parts of the world, actually, and the emerging economies, particularly of Africa, Latin America. So that was all that I was going to say by way of commentary, and we can now move to questions. We have some coming already, and you mentioned the expanding range of global contacts that BVI enjoys. And how do you see future collaboration between financial centres and regulators as these links become more embedded?
Well, I think how the connections are made traditionally have either been via bilateral arrangements between regulators, and I think they probably have greater value than the more common multilateral arrangements, although they're extremely good. We are members of, well, not BVI Finance, but our regulator is members of IOSCO, FATF, and they have strong connections, obviously, with Basel IS as well. But you can't beat the bilateral arrangements, so I'd expect to see more of those. But I do foresee greater collaboration because of the growth of crypto and digital, which is something which is evolving at an exponential rate. And if you look at what certain pioneers have been doing in this space, and one of my favorite places is the state of Wyoming. And they've created 13 fabulous pieces of legislation. And one of the most interesting is looking at digital custody. Our own view is that might be a little premature for very established centres such as our own, but a credit to Wyoming for having the presence of mind and foresight to do that. The reason I say that is just that, quite frankly, it's still evolving, and many academics still can't entirely get their head around it. And it's something which will just continue to evolve, and the best way to stay ahead of that game is to stay connected bilaterally, but also actively engage with the multilateral IMF bodies such as IOSCO, Basel, FATF, IMF, etc.
Thank you very much. We've got a question from Bob McDowell, who's in the Channel Islands, so another island financial community. He just comments that the underlying finances of some small jurisdictions are undergoing some strain in the slipstream of COVID. And do you think the underlying financial strength of the BVI or of each individual jurisdiction will become an important criteria for the selection of where to place your business?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that jurisdictions have all suffered to some extent economically. Our principal revenue is generated by financial services, but also a significant contribution from tourism, which has had an impact over the past year. It's rebounding, thankfully, but we are resilient. And as Channel Islands and many other jurisdictions, some will prosper better than others, without a doubt. But I think the more that jurisdictions can make an environment attractive for business, the better it will be to help their economies rebound. It's tempting sometimes to try and just increase taxes, but it isn't always the long-term solution.
Thank you. We've got a question around fintech and the sandbox, and just asking whether BVI assists fintech companies in making links to banks who can test the products of new companies while they're in the sandbox. Is that something that BVI takes on?
Well, in terms of the actual precise criteria of how the sandbox operates, that's really an ultimate question for that Financial Services Commission. But we do actually have a fully digitized bank on Ireland, Bank of Asia, and that's all they do. And I think that I would happily arrange an introduction equally to the Financial Services Commission and the Sandbox team. They might be slightly better able to answer that question.
That's super. And after the event, I will make sure you have contact details for people who've asked questions, so we can have discussions continuing after the webinar. But Bob's been excited. He's got another question, Bob McDowell, and just saying that how do you see the challenges for small regulatory jurisdictions in terms of resources, competencies, and costs? We've mentioned bilateral collaboration, but how far does collaboration between regulatory jurisdictions help combat the costs of regulation?
Well, there will always be competition, and competition is very healthy, but we derive great benefit and inspiration from the work of the IFC Forum, where we're very active, as are the bulk of the overseas territories and the Crown dependencies. And I think there's very much a good argument for strengthening numbers. And a good example, perhaps, of a kind of collaboration took place around about a year ago with a very good report by RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, where they looked into a number of jurisdictions and spent a great deal of time with us. And they were looking at really the debate over registers for beneficial ownership in terms of public versus private debate. And it was long overdue, but what they did was look at the merits of the arguments of all sides. But that was very collaborative. It wasn't just looking at the BVI, it looked at least one Crown dependency, possibly two, I believe 3 overseas territories. And I think it was an extremely robust and helpful contribution. And I think also, and they had a very good way of summarizing it. They said when they introduced the plan, it was ships passing in the night, as if you had 2 mighty ships. They were passing, but they weren't communicating. So I think that was a good example of how an independent body with support and endorsement of the IFC Forum helped coordinate us all together. And I could see that developing further in the future.
Thank you very much. David Henderson has asked a question about payments in multiple currencies. Just how possible or easy is it to make payments in multiple currencies, pound, dollar, euro, to and from the BVI and from the banks based in the BVI?
Well, the one thing the BVI is not is a vast banking sector. We have a small number of banks, and they tend to operate through correspondent banks, primarily through the United States. We are bizarrely, given it's the British Virgin Islands, we are actually US dollar denominated, which has always intrigued me. I'm not sure how that happened exactly, but it seems to work well. I think that would, again, be a question I'd love to get back to you on, if I may, or at least perhaps direct you to the appropriate parties. That's
super. I'll pass on David's contacts. He has another question which may have the same answer. Just asking about the statistics on the number and value of financial transactions by payment method or destination. It sounds like that may be a level of detail that we need to come back to after the event.
I'm afraid same response. I do apologize.
No, that's super. I'll make sure that you have David's contact details and a note of the question so that we can make those connections after the event. We've got a quick question just on sustainability, green finance, and all of that. Where's BVI positioned in terms of green finance, whether that is standard finance or Islamic finance, which does seem to be the big growth area?
Well, it's an area that we are seeing growth in, and we're very interested in supporting. One of the things we've noticed with our interest in philanthropy from family offices and ultra high net worths is they certainly see that as an integral part of that activity. And likewise, again, environmental is an integral part of Islamic finance, which fundamentally is socially responsible investing. So we are seeing a growth trajectory, and it's something that the BVI entirely supports. And I think it's an area that it is a good win-win for the entire world, and we'll happily continue to support it as best we can. I think the most important thing is our environment, which lends itself to setting up quite attractive funds and business companies, which can be very, very cost effective and very, very helpful in supporting all philanthropic initiatives.
Thank you. And I guess the basic question that has come in, sort of, well, what are the major challenges that BVI faces? Looking over the next 5 years, we know a lot. You've talked a lot about the exciting developments that you've outlined. What are the challenges that you face?
Well, we've just entered hurricane season, so I guess that's a slightly immediate one, although they normally miss us and it's more of a mild inconvenience. But they are seasonal and they're growing, and yes, climate change is definitely upon us. This is a slightly flippant comment, but we are islands which are mountainous, which gives us an advantage. We're not going to sink into the sea. And tragically, you look at places like elements of the Maldives, perhaps elements of the Micronesian islands, which is going to be a significant geographic challenge for them. That won't happen here. There will continue to be challenges from perhaps the growth of extraterritorial regulation, and that's a trend which is going to continue, and we will adapt to it. We try to be as engaged as possible, and we find often when we specify our elements of why things might want to be considered slightly differently, we often find there is actually quite a helpful response. So we will continue to look at those challenges. I think probably it's extraterritorial law, extraterritorial regulation, which is a trend which would have continued irrespective of COVID, quite frankly.
I think so too. Got a question from Nassar Kamali, just asking whether BVI Finance gets involved in attracting or facilitating FDI into the BVI. Is that a role for BVI Finance? And if not, who should he speak to, I guess, is the underlying question.
Well, we can certainly introduce you to the right parties, but that would be a conversation with government representatives. But again, we're very well connected with them, and we can introduce you to the right parties.
That's super. And again, I'll make sure that you have Nassar's email details so that you can carry on the conversation. We're starting to run out of time, so do keep your questions coming if you have further questions for Simon. I guess the question that comes, you mentioned the proposals on minimum tax across the globe, and talking to various financial centres, that is seen as either a challenge or really nothing to worry about, depending on the tax stance of the jurisdiction. How do you think BVI is placed if a minimum tax regime were to be introduced? How would that play out for BVI?
Well, as has happened with other global changes, we will adapt. Currently, we are monitoring the situation with keen interest. We do note in the media and through persons who are well connected with the debate, there are divergent views within some of those G7 countries, and certainly amongst the G20. And of course, you're beginning to see perhaps some slight difference of opinion between elements in the States and Europe. That's healthy. It's part of democracy. It's part of debate. And whilst it may seem a little bit frustrating at times, a satisfactory outcome will arise in due course. But we continue to monitor the situation, and we will adapt with whatever ultimately is agreed.
I think that's the only answer we can probably give, is that if the arrangements are put in place, people will have to adapt and find ways to make that work in their jurisdictions. So many thanks for that. I have no other questions currently placed to us, so I think, Simon, you've satisfied our audience's curiosity on this occasion.
If there are subsequent ones, happy to send them over to me, and I'll do my best to respond.
Yes, we'll send an email out after the event to all those who took part in the webinar, and I'll pass on that kind offer for others who have follow-up questions. So it just remains for me, I think, to offer some thanks. First of all, again, to our sponsors who help us run these series of events by supporting the FS Club. And if you're interested in sponsorship, you know where we are. Please do get in touch. But also to offer my thanks to you, Simon, for a fascinating presentation this afternoon, this morning for you, and for being so willing to answer questions. I will make sure that you're in touch with people who have asked questions during the event. And just say we have an interesting set of other events coming up tomorrow on open banking, Monday meritocracies, a session on another financial centre focusing on Guernsey next week, and a session on cryptocurrency on Wednesday next week. So please, if you are interested in any of those, please sign up to join them. It just remains for me to offer thanks on behalf of the audience to you, Simon. That normally we would open the floor for a round of applause, and that's a bit difficult over a webinar. So you'll have to have a very small round of applause just from me. Thank you for your contribution. We do wish you all the best, and hope you have a very good hurricane season, and hope to be able to talk to you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike, and everyone. Much appreciated.
Thank you.